With the Executive Director of Africa Education Watch in the person of Mr. Kofi Asare. And he's right here with me in the studios of Love 99.5. We talk everything education in Ghana, from the infrastructural gap to the teaching and learning materials and any other thing that we need to talk about when it comes to education in Ghana. Now, earlier I said that if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, you're a headmaster, once you're somebody who understands and appreciates education and its essence or importance, if there's any question at all that is beating your mind and you want him to address for you, feel free and send it to our WhatsApp number 055-1111-995. That's our WhatsApp number. Anything education, he's more than capable of giving you the right answer. 055-1111-995. And we're also live as I speak on Facebook on Love 99.5. Kofi, good morning.
Morning to your cherished audience.
And how are you doing?
Fine. It's a new year.
Hey.
And we are happy for life, and it started well. So we are optimistic that it will end well for our elections.
Yeah, for our elections and for life as well. Well, Kofi Asare has over 20 years of experience in education. That's the education sector, working with schools, communities, parliaments, international organizations, and government agencies on education policy. Now, he has specialties in basic education, TVET, and education financing, and he has authored dozens of publications. Now, Kofi has represented civil society on the Ministerial Advisory Board of the Ministry of Education and Education Sector, working in technical committees, played key roles in the development of previous education strategic plan, that is ESP, between the years 2010-2020 and the current one, that is the ESP 2018-2030, and consulted extensively for local and international organizations as well. Now, in 2016, he was awarded the Millennium Excellence Award for Rural and Urban Development by the Millennium Excellence Foundation under the distinguished patronage of His Royal Majesty Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II. That's Asante Hene. Well, he holds a bachelor's degree in economics and sociology, a master's degree in governance and development from the University of Cape Coast, a Bachelor of Laws from the University of London, and currently a doctoral candidate at the Lincoln University in Malaysia. Charlie, this chief is big.
Oh, no, this work.
What brings you to town, by the way?
I am in town to do a couple of engagements as part of our advocacy work. Mm-hmm. At the beginning of the year, after how we call our annual review meeting, where we converge stakeholders to discuss key issues in the sector and the priority areas for the government and for all stakeholders in the new year. We do the dissemination of these key issues, and then so that stakeholders are aware of the roles they have to play to support government to achieve the educational objectives in the year. So that is primarily why I am.
But how relevant is all that you said you're in town for? How relevant is it? I mean, I ask that question in the sense that when you sit down and brainstorm, share ideas, bring out the proposals, are they made use of well enough?
Yes. Many times people think when we talk, it ends with spoken word. No. A lot of changes occur when we talk. And we don't just talk, we engage. In a week, I can tell you in a week, the person I would criticize most will be the Minister of Education, right? Mm. Because my job is to demand accountability from him. But in that same week, I think I speak to him more than any other person. And I am able to measure progress on the basis of the issues we raise in public, the follow-ups we make from duty bearers, including the Minister of Education in private, and the outcomes that emerge. So I can give you just one typical example. When we started raising issues about the leakage of WASI in 2020, we didn't have the support of the Ministry of Education. But the then minister, rubbished it, that it was not true. But today, we have the ministry bringing in a BNI to take over the printing, the security of the printing of WASI questions since last year. Mm. And we are not seeing leakages in the papers. Okay, so that is a comprehensive change from using the regular police and then wire security who were in charge of questions printing, which occasioned leakages. Because we were buying questions from merchants and we were getting them, having them delivered to us in 2020, 2021. 2022 BNI is brought in by the minister as the result of our work, and leakages are no more. And so it is, I mean, a compendium of, list of outcomes emerging from our advocacy.
Can I ask you how you rate or judge the performance of this current, education minister, Educhu?
Oh, I think he's doing well. It's not a comfortable question to ask, but he's a great guy. He's not afraid to think. I like people who are not afraid to think, because I believe that in policy one must be innovative and dynamic and not dogmatic and ritualist, paying overly attention to existing rules. And so in thinking, some believe he's sometimes over ambitious. Indeed, in some areas he is, and that's a danger. But he's clear about the path he wants to chart. He's clear about His Excellency's ambition and vision for education. I think that where he hasn't scored 8 over 10 is in the area of how he rolls out policies. A typical private sector person. And so civil society organizations have had challenges with his style. He engages after he takes decisions. Okay? And we call that in participation, in the field of participation, we call that information. Participation starts from information. That's the lowest form of participation. The highest form of participation is consensus. So he only informs. And that is where we've had challenges with how he develops policy. Because if you inform us at a point where policy has been cooked, how do we support you? Even if we have new ideas, it becomes challenging because everything is cast in stone. And indeed, it really is. So because of the issues we've raised about his style, I've seen some changes in how he does things. For example, as we speak, there's a process to finalize the secondary education curriculum. It's been going through consultation for about 2 years. As we speak, there's a process to review the teacher, the National Teacher Education Framework. And it's been going through consultation for almost 2 years too. And I'm part of that process. I'm not saying I'm endorsing the approach because I'm part of this process. But I'm saying that is how policy should be developed and reviewed. Not only communicated to stakeholders as a sign of participation, but rather bringing them on board from the conceptual stages of policy to formative stages, so that they feel part of it. They bring on board ideas that you may see to be complementary to your broad vision, and then they feel they own the policy because they were part of its construction. And then they support you in the implementation rather than coming to tell you about problems. So it will. I mean, very soon we'll get there. But I think he's a good guy. Okay, and then he understands. He knows his onions. So he understands his work. Okay, and he appreciates criticism as well.
And that's one thing about life. If you take criticisms, you take feedback, it helps you grow. Let's talk about the Ghana education sector itself, generally speaking. If we take it from the basic level, let's say to the senior high school level, what shape would you say it is in? How would you describe our education sector as we speak currently?
Well, secondary education, we are doing about 8 over 10. We are doing very well. Basic education, I think we are doing about 4, if not 3 over 10.
Wow.
Tertiary, we are fine, let's say about 7. Now, my ratings, education is a function of investment. Largely, okay. So if you invest in critical sectors of the economy, in education, and you guard the investment, they will generate the required outcomes, and it will manifest in the long term in learning outcomes. Okay. So without money, you cannot remove schools under trees. Without money, you cannot build STEM schools, equip them with modern teaching and learning resources. And without money, you cannot build universities, expand access to tertiary education, and improve the quality of instruction in our schools.
So let's start with
money is primary.
Everything. So you talked about removing schools under trees, and I know that there was a plan to get about, is it the 5,403 schools under trees, and which of course would also comprise schools in dilapidated structures and all that. And we have these number of schools that are not in the right shape. And we all know that when it comes to learning, education, the infrastructure itself is good. Looking at the basic level of education, how well are we doing when it comes to infrastructure? What shape is it in? And if you don't mind, I know that you do a lot of rounds. If you can give us the situation in our region, the Ashanti region, I'll be very glad.
Infrastructure we are doing, 1/10 is very charitable. Yeah, it's been business as usual. Business as usual. In 2021, we set out. If I say we, I always feel part of the government because my responsibility as a citizen is to support the government to succeed. We set out to roll out a program. We set out or roll out a program to eliminate all schools under tree sheds and dilapidated structures within 5 years. And we are in year 4 of the plan. Now, 5,403 schools, meaning that every year we would have cleared at least 1,100 schools. We are in year 4 and we've cleared less than 50 schools. And if we continue at this pace, it will take us over 130 years to do what we said we would do in 5 years. In 2021, we required 3.5 billion to achieve this target. And we couldn't raise 3.5 billion.
But the thing has increased, hasn't it?
Yes. Construction sector inflation, last year alone, you had about 48% construction sector inflation. Just
so from
year.
3.5, it's now hovering around 5 point something.
It can be 5 because we are talking about the inflation. We are talking about inflationary trends from 2021. Between 2021 and 2023, price changes is over 80%.
So right now, where are we? What figures are we looking
at? We need about 10 billion to eliminate all schools under tree sheds and dilapidated structures today. Wow. And that is about a third of the education budget. Don't forget that about 60%, 65% of the education budget already goes for salaries. It is not discretionary.
10 billion, is it cedis or dollars?
Cedis. Cedis.
But what happened to the GET funds monies? If my memory serves me right, the GET fund is supposed to help, especially in infrastructure. The VACO funds and all those monies available. Monies are oftentimes, allocated. Are they not disbursed for us to be able to do something on a continuous level to get this schools and the trees, the dilapidated structures fixed and all that? What's the situation?
Yeah, ideally, it's good you mentioned VACO. So VACO Trust Fund was a partner to government on the schools and the trees agenda. But from where I sit, only VACO Trust Fund is putting money into the kitty.
Okay.
Government has.
Do we know how much they're putting so far, roughly?
The last time I checked, it was 2% of what was required.
Can you give me in figure terms?
No, I don't know the figure, but it was 2% of what was required. That was 1 year after launching the fund. 1 year after launching the fund, it was just about 300 million or so. Yeah, and it was just about 30 million or so. Yeah. And we raised questions about the inertia, Then a website was established with various payment portals for citizens to contribute, But we kept saying that government must put in seed money. The way government puts seed money in the cathedral, put in seed money. Put in $25 million, the way you did for other ones. So that it will encourage Kofi Asare as a citizen to also put money in them. But we didn't see that happening, and we've not seen that happening as today. GET Fund is actually a limping man. GET Fund has been limping since the Minister of Finance went to Parliament to cap GET Fund and then also approve its partial securitization for a loan. So at the end of the day, we only get about 35 to 40% of what accrues to the GET Fund levy as a result of you paying GET Fund when you buy anything in Ghana. So GET Fund gets only, less than 40% of what should have been inured to GET Fund as GET Fund accrual to fund GET Fund.
And of course, you mentioned that, the securitization, and I'm sure that the monies that they borrowed was what? To expand the infrastructure at the senior high school level?
The securitization was to take a loan, the city equivalent of 1.5 billion, the city equivalent of $1.5 billion loan to expand secondary education infrastructure. Yeah, that was securitization. But unfortunately, it has suffered. I mean, it has suffered a lot, of challenges along the way. It was first a syndication loan given by 5 banks, including Car Bank, ADB, and 5 banks. Then, after year 1, government struggled to begin to pay their loan, and then also, so the partners also didn't release the money. And then government, on the basis of that, decided to metamorphose it into a bond program called the Dachi Bond. Now we have the Dachi Bond. And then, so we started raising funds from the public to fund the construction of the senior high schools. In the inflationary, in our years of economic downturn in 2021, 2022 especially, we saw a decline in the subscription of the bond. So we were not able to raise as much as needed in those years, the pre-IMF years, the immediate years before the IMF's intervention. IMF's intervention brought some credibility and confidence in the economy. Then we've seen subscriptions to the bond program go up. But the issue is that we haven't been able to raise enough money through that arrangement, in the sense that if we had, by now we would have completed all secondary school projects being financed and ended double track long ago. If you read the handing over notes of the previous minister, it suggested that 2 years from that time, all projects should have ended, because this securitization happened in 2018. Yeah. But we still have uncompleted projects in the secondary education sector.
One other thing that beats my mind, Kofi Asare, is the fact that the citizens were called upon, various portals, like you rightly mentioned, were made available for some contributions to be made to help develop some of these things. How come citizens didn't buy into the idea? I mean, is it to suggest that we don't care about the education of our children, or what?
In terms of infrastructure?
Yes, the contributions that we're supposed to contribute to.
Citizens, we are citizens, okay? So let me just give you an example. I live in East Legon, and if you want me to support you to build a school, I expect that the local assembly, should engage me and let me appreciate what it is doing about infrastructure and the challenges it's facing about infrastructure and why they need my support. I won't wake up in the morning and walk to Ayawaso, West Wugon, or Adenta, and then go and ask, do you have enough schools? I have money for. No, it doesn't work like that. It is demand driven. So our local assemblies haven't fashioned out a strategy yet to rope in citizens' support for infrastructure. We are working on a project, with support from Star Ghana and FCDO, that's the British government, to develop a framework that will support the office of the head of the local government service and then the assemblies to devise a strategy to rope in the corporate sector at the local level, including farmer-based groups, faith-based organizations, trade associations, to contribute towards infrastructure financing. If it's about monthly MOMO contribution or quarterly MOMO contribution, very little or whatever it is. At the end of the day, what happens is that it is easier for 20, 30, 40 companies, economic groups or units to contribute towards buying desks for a school than expecting Love FM to come and build a whole school for a district. You understand? So we are working on a framework, and next week we're going to have a meeting with the office of the head of the local government service, to have a first view of the draft, after which we'll have a convening of private sector stakeholders, the telcos, the banks, the real estate companies, and other identified economic units. We believe that, especially the faith-based organizations, we believe that the schools we are seeing in Ghana today, out of about 14,400 primary schools we have in the country, majority of them are owned by the faith-based organizations. The Catholic Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, AME Zion, SDA, they own the majority of the schools. Why is it that today's churches are not building schools? The new churches. These are big churches, And so we think that if these assemblies adopt such a framework, strategy to rope in the corporate sector, and we define the corporate sector to include the faith-based organizations, it will provide a platform for all some of these churches to contribute something into building infrastructure. Not saying go and build a school for us, no, but contribute something. If 10 churches can contribute 100,000 in a whole year, that can build one basic school, and it will serve the needs of the congregants in the particular church.
So looking at government itself, would you say government itself is committed to see the end of schools under trees?
No.
Because you talked about looking at the commitment and the seed money that we gave for the National Cathedral.
Yeah,
that 400 million Ghana cedis, for example, as seed money and all. How many basic schools can it build? So first of all, you're saying that no, government is not showing enough commitment. But that amount of money, how many basic schools could it have?
The seed money for the Cathedral. How much did they put in?
I know that roughly we have 400 million Ghana cedis in there.
400 million Ghana cedis. So that's a minimum of 400 schools. That's a minimum of 400 schools. And the schools deficits in Ashanti region alone is close to 800. Okay, it's close to 800. So it tells you that it can solve all the schools deficits in Ashanti region by half. That money alone.
Are we talking about units here or what?
Pardon me?
Is it units in terms of 3 units, 6 units? What kind of units are we talking about here?
Oh, I'm separating junior high schools from primary schools.
Okay.
In Ashanti region, about 30% of junior high schools do not have primary schools. Sorry, about 30% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. If you want to achieve parity in primary and junior high school and ensure that if someone completes school in a community in Ejura, they don't have to walk for 5 kilometers to continue to junior high school, which is the major cause of dropout in our educational system. About 30% of students drop out between primary 1 and junior high school 3 because of that particular factor. We lose a third of our students. So if we want to achieve parity in our basic education system and have a junior high school for every primary school, that money you're talking about can solve the junior high school problem immediately.
And unfortunately, government is not taking this seriously. We're not working towards that direction. Let's talk about the issue of allocation and disbursement. For example, the GET Fund. I mean, last year they were supposed to have allocated, disbursed some 90 million or more?
For basic education.
Yes. And where's that money? I mean, so when it comes to allocation, the allocations are made. But when it comes to disbursements, what's the challenge?
So the challenge in education financing is that there's always a huge gap between allocation and disbursement. It runs through the education sector. At the end of last year, at the end of the third quarter of last year, when the Minister of Finance was going to Parliament to read the new budget, we were around 70% disbursement. Okay, or we call it budget credibility. It means that we have spent only 70% of what was approved. Okay, that was even good because of the IMF program and its conditionalities and all that. But in previous years, sometimes the minister goes to Parliament in November to read the budget, and by then we are scarcely spending 60% of the budget. And a clear example is the free senior high school program. Between 2019, 2020, 2021. The budget credibility keeps reducing. By the end of 2021, we spent only 51% of what was allocated to free senior high school. Only 51%. When the policy started, it was 120%. We spent more than budgeted in the first year, 2017-18. It has been declining since then to 51%, end of 2021. And it runs through the education sector. GET Fund, in the past 7 years, there hasn't been any year where GET Fund has disbursed more than 51% of allocation in that particular year.
Is it because of the loan that was taken or what?
It is because the finance ministry is not releasing the little that is left. You are receiving about 5 billion cedis in terms of accruals to the GET Fund levy. But because you have capped the GET Fund, you are allocating only 2 billion. Okay, you've taken 3 billion. Bring the 2 billion to NIASM.
How do we get the finance ministry to release the money? What will it take for us to get there?
It is difficult. All our engagement with GET Fund, finance ministry will not show up. I have had meetings with the finance minister. We met with the finance minister a week before the budget was prepared. You meet them in that meeting too. GET Fund won't be there. You will hardly meet the two in one room.
Can Parliament, for example, invite the finance minister?
Oh, it's going beyond that. Parliament can't do anything. Parliament, because they are paid for Parliament. If you read the Hansard, every year before the committee of a whole approves the formula, the sentiments members of Parliament, regardless of their political persuasion, express before approving the formula are the sentiments I'm expressing today. That it is unacceptable that only 49% of the fund we allocated the previous year, we approved per an allocation formula the previous year, has been disbursed by this time. And that we want to see an increased disbursement. And listen, Parliament appropriates GET fund in March, April, not November, December, like the budget. So if in March, April of the next year, you have not disbursed 50% of GET fund of the previous year, then it's a problem. And it runs through every Hansard. So if Parliament had any magic wand, if Parliament intervention, would have seen.
But Kofi, what hurts me is that here we have a campaign that we do, the sanitary pad campaign we call it. We're having a show, and this is the Oforokrom constituency. A lady teacher called and was saying that female children were using exercise books, newspapers, fold them, and then use it at the time of the month. They use their socks, they use all manner of things to help protect themselves when it's that time of the month. So on the show, I decided, listen, let's call on people to help, and people keep helping. We go out to the schools to give them, these sanitary pads. You go to a school, you enter the classroom, and you ask yourself, in this kind of environment, how the person who is being taught imbibe what the person is being taught. Classroom has a portals, has a galamsey site.
Yeah.
You see these things and your heart breaks.
So what I say is that, you see, the actors we are describing are political actors. The priority of the country is what determines the expediency of releases. And if you like, the cash flow of the Ministry of Finance is heavily influenced by the political priority. The issue we are discussing is not a political priority. It's not that the finance minister is stubborn. The issue we are discussing is not a political priority. Last year, 90 million was allocated for the construction of new basic schools. Yeah. That's a drop in an ocean. We have about 216 assemblies, right? This is 61 or 16. 261 district assemblies. And in the past 4 years, we are doing about 0.63 schools per year. Every year, the whole district, let's take one district, the whole of Ejura, you build only 0.63, not one school, 0.63. So we are far behind catching up with the infrastructure deficit.
Why can't we make it a priority, Kofi? Because aside from what I said, that we witness when we go out there, Multimedia Group puts up features and documentaries, the schools of shame.
It is not a priority because the funding prioritizes secondary education. Maybe I haven't said that. That's why I said that what we are discussing is a function of the politicals. The political priority is secondary education. Yeah. The situation when it comes to funding infrastructure in our senior high schools is the opposite of what we are discussing. Yeah. You understand?
Yes, I do.
And let me finish what I was saying. 90 million was allocated for new basic schools. The amount was woefully inadequate. It could provide only 90 schools for over 200 assemblies. That's fine. By November, not even a single CD had been released from the 90 million. 20 million or so was allocated for ongoing basic school projects. Funds had been released for that. 30 million or so was allocated for kindergarten projects. By November, only 2 million had been released. So the priority, so far as I'm concerned, is not basic education. And that is the challenge we have.
But isn't that the foundation? Everything the foundation ought to be paramount.
It is the foundation. It is supposed to be the foundation. But we have gotten to a point where our secondary education policy we are running, which became a crash program because we didn't even say double track and quickly had to, find money and then put it in expanding infrastructure at the basic level to try and accommodate the increasing numbers of the free senior high school. Don't forget, a free senior high school program has increased enrollment from about 800,000 to almost 1.4 million students. That 50% increase in enrollment requires that every school in Ghana, the capacity to admit will increase by 50%. You know what that means. And so we didn't foresee these huge numbers. That is why overtaking and quickly had to go to double track. So the meaning is that we are still running an ambulance service policy called free senior high school because the demand is increasing. Last year, we admitted close to 500. Last year, we admitted about 440K. This year, we are admitting about 450,000. And so the demand is not reducing. The demand is increasing. It means that you need more money to expand infrastructure. Because that is a political priority. Free senior high school is a political promise. Basic education, free basic education is not a political promise. So because one is a political promise, in the face of the increased demand for secondary education, all money we find must be put at secondary education so that we're able to fulfill this promise.
Would you say that we're spending too much on the free SHS at the detriment of basic education, primary education and all that?
If you say too much, I don't think we are spending too much on secondary education. Because we are not spending what we are supposed to spend on secondary education. We are spending much less on secondary education. If you ask me, I won't say we are spending too much, but we are spending much less on secondary education. But I'm saying that the much less we are spending on secondary education is even to the disadvantage of basic education.
Having said that,
you understand?
Yes,
so we are stifling basic education of the needed funding, but it doesn't mean we are spending so much on secondary.
I understand.
Because what you are spending appears to be high, but it is not so much taking into cognizance the needs of secondary education.
I like that. And that's why I said that the basic education is the foundation, because if you get the foundation right, it dovetails into the senior high school.
Exactly.
I want us to talk about, the change of curriculum where new curriculum was introduced and textbooks matter. But because you're talking about the senior high school education, when somebody sits back and says it's free education, free SHS, what shape is it in? Because I have sat in the same studios and engaged with people who have said that you have students who sit on plastic chairs. We have students who stand and write during examination. We have had headmasters who have complained that they don't have enough beds. Admission just completed. I think even in some ways, some schools are still admitting a few students. They don't have beds available. And they're asking parents to support them with beds. Some students were told are sleeping on the bare floor. Furniture is not available. What are we doing even with the senior high school level? Why can't we provide these basic things? Furniture, beds and stuff.
When we say free senior high school, it doesn't mean everything is free. And I need to explain this for parents to appreciate that they have contributions to make to ensure that secondary education becomes fully accessible. Before free senior high school, and this is very important, before free senior high school started in 2017, parents were paying school fees. They were paying for uniforms. They were paying for feeding. They were paying for exercise books. They were paying for admission fees. They were paying for SRC fees. They were paying for medical fees, etc., etc. So all that made up school fees. And averagely, a boarder was paying 1,000 cedis. Okay, that's in an initial year when you are going to school fresh. As a result, but then government was paying tuition fees. Government was paying teachers. Government was still building schools, providing textbooks. So that one is not part of free senior high school. So free senior high school came on board to absorb the fees that you, the parent, was paying, to reduce the cost of secondary education to you, the parents, so that poor parents could go to school. Could enroll their children. Now, our work on the free senior high school, and this is a cost incidence analysis of the free senior high school. We sought to ascertain the burden sharing on the free senior high school. To it, as a result of the introduction of the free senior high school, how much of your burden as a parent has been taken away from you compared to how much you were paying before the policy was introduced in 2017. We'll publish that report next week.
Next week, okay.
The findings indicate that as a result of the introduction of the free senior high school, by the end of 2022, government was paying 1,200 cedis a year for every child in senior high school. And parents were paying 4,200 cedis. The meaning is that parents are paying 2/3 of the cost. We're talking about the cost of prospectus, talking about cost of transport, provisions, toiletries, and then top money. Okay? So parents bear 2/3 of the cost of secondary education, and government also pays 1/3. So free senior high school does not mean everything is free. Contributions must go. Other than that, the policy will not stand. That is the reality of the situation. So you don't have DEX. The DEX and infrastructure issues you are raising is a function of what I told you earlier, a funding arrangement to expand infrastructure, which hasn't worked the way it was imagined at the beginning. And also, lack of adequate planning at the beginning of the policy, because we should have foreseen that once you are removing the cutoff entry to secondary schools, there was a cutoff at grade 36. Once you are removing the cutoff and allowing grade 54 students to go to school, the numbers were going to increase. We didn't foresee all that. And so we are still running an ambulance service. That is why in some schools you don't have beds. I don't envy the Ministry of Education at all, because from day one till date, the Free Senior High School is still work in progress. It's an ambulance service. Everything is an emergency. We haven't reached a point of stability where we can say we are going to manage it as a normal policy.
So you hear former President John Dramani Mahama say, well, we'll review it. And then the current education minister says, well, it needs an improvement. Is it semantics, or what do you make of this policy, this free SHS? What should be done to it that will make it better?
The Minister of Education's pronouncement is about nomenclature. He says he doesn't believe in reviewing it, which is consistent with the political view, of his boss, the president. But he says that he believes there should be value addition, and so we can improve on it. So you can add certain things that are not in the program to improve its quality and not review it. So how he chooses to call adding something to it addition and not a review is a matter of nomenclature. That's fine. The former president also saying that he will review it is also that is not fine with me. I think that we are in year 7 of the implementation of the Free Senior School policy. In year 7, the NDC should be telling us they'll review the Free Senior School policy. And I keep saying this. In year 7, the NDC should be telling us what exactly they will do about the policy. And not say they will call stakeholders.
Meetings.
No. Stakeholders are not the ones who are going to determine what you should do. We will make inputs into what you should do. But if you are a government in waiting, what you bring to the table are a set of policy proposals or reform proposals. This is what I will do about the policy. So after you have tabled them, then you say, I will meet stakeholders and discuss my proposals. Okay? So I feel a bit uncomfortable when I hear we'll review. I think we've gone beyond that, because we've seen the policy. We've seen the policy for 7 years. We've seen 7 different statements from CHAS every year on what should be done to review the policy. We've seen various statements from the Catholic bishops, from African Education Watch, from IFES, from parents. So many. I have a folder that contains all of this. So there are so many interest groups, and they have expressed their sentiments, their ideas about how to improve the policy through position papers written. And all these are available. So
let me be direct. One of the questions that I noted down is, what do you expect to be done to the free SHS?
I think the first thing that should be done about the Free Senior High School is that the procurement of food, teaching and learning resources should be re-decentralized to the schools. It was centralized, to centralize procurement. And we know procurement, the interest of procurement is a political issue. I think that the whole buffer stock arrangement and the Ghana Commodity Exchange arrangement that we currently have, where we are spending about 1.5 billion to procure food for schools. You are buying yam for a school, you are buying maize for a school in Nigeria, where it dries the headquarters for maize. We should scrap that arrangement and allow the schools to do their procurement locally. And then let the schools give contracts to local suppliers, build the local economies where the schools are located, and create jobs in those localities. Instead of giving one businessman in Accra the contract to supply food meant for about 20 schools. You must distribute wealth. You understand? So I think that we must re-decentralize the procurement of food, re-decentralize the procurement of school uniforms, exercise books. Let's re-decentralize them, because the schools did not demonstrate incapacity in procuring food. They have been doing it since Kwame Nkrumah.
Even now, they still do, because when there are challenges of school food availability in the schools, they
collect money from the PTAs and then they buy them. Yeah,
and they do some butter as well. So
exactly.
This one called the school. Do you have rice?
Why are they doing butter?
I don't have maize. Do you have sugar? Then they trade amongst themselves.
Why are they doing butter? Because there's incongruity in, I need more milk, you give me more sugar. Yeah. I'm just doing an example. Yeah. So let the schools buy their foods. If Presec has over 5,000 students, If the Presec headmaster and his management can manage 5,500 students, look at how difficult it is to manage 2 children in your house. And if the Presec headmaster can manage 5,500 students, who told you he can't buy his own food?
Did you see anything wrong with the sanctions that was placed on some head teachers who, during the registration exercise or the admission exercise, asked parents to pay for some items that the students would need anyway, the hymn books, the training kits, and all those things that they were sanctioned for? Do you see anything wrong with it?
I see nothing wrong with the sanctions. And I'll come to the second thing that should be done by the Free National Policy. I think that's wrong with the sanctions because you are an employee. Your employer says don't take any extra money from the parents. Don't take it.
But it's something they need anyway.
It's the school your own.
The school is not yours.
Yes.
They will need it when they're in school.
If they need it, have you seen a headmaster who has been sacked because the school is smelling because there's no parazone? Do you ever hear of a headmaster who was sacked because the kids were hungry? The headmaster's job is not to feed them. He doesn't cook for them. He doesn't buy food for them. You are saying someone will bring food. When the food arrives, cook. The food doesn't arise. I complain, it doesn't come. Can you sack me? No. It's simple. That's what the children are saying. Work with the resources you have. You are not a magic. It's not enough, but don't get into trouble with your employer because you can be fired. You don't break the law to uphold the law. The reality is that government knows that the things that the agencies are taking money to go and buy are not in existence. That's why they are taking the money. But government is playing ostrich. So you to sit down, get your salary, do your work. If you have a whole weed, no one will be punished for weeding the farm with a hoe when you didn't give them a bulldozer. So please, an employee must work with the tools available. It's in the labor law. Okay, but if you want to go beyond your bounds and do what your employer is saying don't do by taking money, it's called extortion. You don't do that. If the kids are hungry and there's no food, report to the regional education director. If nothing happens, you are there. No one can hold you responsible because your job is not to buy food to feed the kids.
What in the situation where a school doesn't have food? The kids are hungry. They haven't ate the night before. And yet a head is preventing parents from bringing food to the children.
The head cannot prevent parents.
It has happened.
So that is irresponsibility because no rule prevents a parent from bringing food to their ward. Especially given the circumstances you're explaining that the school hasn't got food. So that is unacceptable. It is an abuse of discretion. But let me quickly come to what should be done by the fiscal. Okay. Apart from decentralizing the procurement of items, the second thing that should happen under the program is that the program must be targeted. Now, until last year, there was a group of between 10 to 15% of students who were always placed but couldn't go to school. And one of the key reasons is because of funding. In a particular year, close to about 30,000 students were placed, but they couldn't go to school. Last year, in 2023, it lowered. Okay. But the number was about 5,000. It's still high, right? Okay. Now, because we work with poor people, we know that there are many poor households. Households with annual household expenditure of about 7,000. Those in the low income quintiles. If a household expenditure is 7,000 for the whole year, and there are about 4 people in the household, obviously it's difficult for the household to accept admission, pay prospectus. We just finished putting somebody in Presec. We spent 6,000, okay, just yesterday. So the issue is this: why won't you target the policy by giving more instead of the 1,200 you are spending averagely a year per unit? Why won't you target the policy by giving more to the children from these poor households who belong to the lowest income quintile so that they can get 6,000 and have no reason not to honor their admission and rather give less to children from households that have expenditure more than 30K or 20K? This is not impossible. Why am I saying it's not impossible? Because we have what we call the Ghana Household Registry System. And we have data from the Ghana Statistical Service. It is based on this data that Ghana disburses funds every month under the LEAP program. Yeah. The LEAP program is benefiting more than 300,000 households that Ghana has identified as poor households across the country. So we have a registry of over 1 million beneficiaries in these poor households. So it is not the case that we don't have the data. So if you know that this household is a poor household and every month you are sending them, every 2 weeks you are sending them stipends under LEAP, why is it suddenly impossible for you to locate these same households and say that you are the poorest per our database. And so we are giving you more money for free senior high school. Or you are the ones who are going to enjoy 100% free senior high school.
Isn't that the thought of the finance minister when he granted an interview?
Yes, that was his thought. That was his thought.
So if you have that thought, why can't he implement?
What I'm saying is, I did economics. I never did education. I did economics. This is what makes economic sense, because you are managing the scarce resources you have in a judicious manner, such that the poorest who are at risk of losing their educational rights because they don't have money are giving more money, and those who don't need it at all or who need little are giving little. Equitable distribution of resources. Equity in the distribution of the free senior high school cake requires a review. That's the second thing that must be reviewed. If these two things are done, you will free resources automatically, support more poor people to get more things as part of the free senior high school, including their trunk and troubles, so that they can come to school. Then you give less to the children of people who are in the capacity to pay, because they are not part of the poor households in Ghana. If anyone says we don't have data on the poor households, that person is just not ready to accept that the policy can be targeted. We have them because that's the basis for which government disburses LEAP cash grants to the poorest in Ghana. You are not receiving it because you are not on the database. Bracket, yeah. I am also not receiving it because I'm not in that household. It means that those who are there are getting it.
And the LEAP program has been touted as one of the very best.
One of the best social interventions.
But unfortunately, we're not making very good use of it. For want of time, let me quickly rush through the JHS. How would you describe it? Because again, we introduced a new curriculum. Textbooks has been the problem. I sat in the same studios, spoke to the director for NACA, and there are issues with textbooks. Well, these same students will be writing exams. So if the textbooks are not available, how do they learn well enough to be able to go write exams? So what is the situation as we speak? Has there been any improvement? At the JHS level, there hasn't been any improvement. Well, I was supposed to meet the Publishers Association yesterday, but the meeting was cancelled. Maybe it's going to be next week. But from where I sit, the textbook challenge is a huge one. It is not likely that junior high school students will see textbooks before they write their BC this year. They won't see textbooks. We haven't managed it well. When we were launching a new curriculum, I granted an interview at Nat Hall where the curriculum was being launched, and I said that the curriculum, content-wise, focus, strategy, the framework is great. It responds to the real needs of today. But I've seen various curricula in the past, and I can tell you that our problem is never with the curriculum. What's the problem?
The building blocks. The building blocks. It's always been the case. A beautiful curriculum, no textbooks. You have a course called French, and then you can hardly find a French teacher in the whole district, some of the districts. So it's always been about Akandiano. It is not about the curriculum. It is about the building blocks. First, textbooks. And after that interview, we went 4 years without textbooks in our basic schools. Now we have about 63% of the books we require, the 4 core, in our basic schools. But there are some districts that do not even have one textbook in mathematics. The junior high schools, the batch that writing BC this year, they started junior high school 1 in the new curriculum with the common core. And they'll be writing an exam next year. And they will not see a textbook. Textbooks are difficult to procure. Textbooks cost. Okay. And so, apart from that, the process of developing the textbooks requires that private people are brought together to develop content, publish it, and government to buy after approving them through NACA. It's a process. That's why we advise the government that there was no need to rush and introduce a curriculum when you don't have a clear timeline about when textbooks are available. They didn't listen. So we are where we are because we knew we were going to be here. We haven't managed it well in the past. In the past, it was the same. So when we were raising the issue, government kept telling us, well, but in the past, we went 3 years, 4 years. I said, are we working backwards?
Or working forwards?
Unfortunately, we are working backwards. So that's
what impact is it going to have on these candidates?
Oh, for junior high schools, I would say it won't have an impact on the results.
Why? Because
the BEC result is non-referenced. It's a bell curve. No matter what you do, 4% will have grade 1 in a subject. No matter what you do, the next 7% will have grade 2. The next 12% will have grade 3. It's non-referenced. And then the last 4% will have grade 9. It's a bell curve. And so it won't change the number of people who have 1 or 9. You understand? BEC is just for placement purposes. BEC is not a certification for anything. It is not a proficiency examination. It is just to determine who goes to Louis and who goes to Benkum Senior High School. That's the only reason why we do BEC. So it will not affect the BEC. But it will affect them as they go to secondary school, because there are a lot of things that we assume you would have learned well in junior high school 3 or junior high school 2 as you enter senior high school 1. So we should not play with such things. They are very, very important. Tertiary education. Tertiary education.
When you listen to, for example, you listen to the former president, John Dramani Mahama, who says, well, students are allowed to copy. And that's how come it seems like they're doing so well. And then, the education minister and, of course, the vice president and the flag bearer of the NPP then comes to say, oh, it's not so bad, it's through their hard work and their efforts. What do you think the situation really is? Are they writing exams and passing well, or they are being allowed to copy like John Dramani Mahama said?
I think we are seeing the highest level of examination malpractice in our history. And the levels we are seeing now cannot be compared to any time in our history. And I'm not sure there can be any higher level again. WAEC themselves had a press conference in the midst of the WASI. They had a press conference and they were complaining to us that the collusion has gone beyond control. That's why I complained to us. Normally we should complain to WAEC. They had a press conference. What the former president said was exactly what WAEC said. He didn't say anything. And we all know that what he said, is the case. And he's not the first person to have said that. Maybe he's the first politician to have said that. So he said nothing new. I won't talk about it. WAEC, when the WAEC results were issued, you saw subject results from 235 schools being referred. You saw that.
Yeah.
When last year that 235 schools are having subject results released. As we sit here, there's a school like Okes. Their results in maths, English, and science have still not been released.
And I have parents who are complaining.
And we have 235. So look at how parents are feeling very, very bad. Just Okes. And I'm in touch with Okes parents. And I know how they are worried. You understand?
Because people have gained entry into universities.
No.
I'm building a point. People have gained entry into the universities. You say you have withheld results. You're looking into it. Whether there's a challenge and they will be sanctioned or not, or they'll be cleared for them to go. They don't know their faith right now, whether they're going to continue their education.
So it's not a comfortable situation. I just want to understand that. Multiply the Okes situation by 235 and you understand the magnitude. The issue is that examination coalition has become a subculture in our education system. There are schools where everybody in the environment, you see, is compromised. And so once papers are shared, answers are delivered, and then they just copy. And WAEC has capacity to be present physically in terms of their staff in only 20% of the centers. In 80%, WAEC uses GES staff. So you hear they call somebody external supervisor. It's not a WAEC person, the GES staff. In many schools, the headmaster is a supervisor. Now, we are saying that this escalation in examination malpractice is as a result of two things. One is because questions are no more leaking, which is great because the government put interventions to do that. But because questions are no more leaking, the teachers who are the foundation of this examination fraud business and who get the money, not all teachers, some of the teachers, they have changed their strategy and said that once questions are not leaking, then we must have control of the examination room.
How do we fix that?
So once we open the question pack, we solve it, and we send the questions answers through WhatsApp platforms to the students' copy.
How do we fix that?
We fix that by ensuring that in every center we have CCTV cameras there. The challenge is that there are some schools that do not have big assembly halls to write examination. But that shouldn't deter us from fixing CCTV cameras in their classrooms. If they write it in 5 classrooms, let's fix cameras in 5 classrooms. How much does it cost? So we decouple the human elements from the examination. Because in the particular room, who are the people supervising? There's a teacher who's an invigilator, another teacher or staff of GES supervisor. Everyone has an interest in the outcome of the examination. And here's the case where some of these teachers, some have collected money from the students to supervise them so that they can cheat. So what do? Nothing happens there. So move them from the classroom.
Digital.
The second proposal is that we should look at e-testing. And I've been discussing it with Educhum several times about the e-testing. He believes that what we call serialization, where we will be in one room, we are 100 in a particular room. They're writing the same answer paper, but you might be writing 50 different papers. Such that if you have to, I can't look here and copy yours because your questions might be different from mine. I think that is also fine, but it doesn't solve the problem. Because the problem is that the teacher will solve questions and bring them in the exam hall. Anyway. If it's 50, they will still solve 25. So tech, once you bring in tech and decouple the human involvement, you are solving the problem sustainably. Okay. So if someone says that the high levels of examination practices we are witnessing today can have an implication on examination results, it is a truism. I have some results of some schools in Ashanti region here. If I show them to you, these are remedial schools. That people who enter the schools are people who have failed WASI. And when they live there, the least grade is B2. People who cannot speak English, who cannot string not a paragraph, a sentence in English. I have an A in English. I have the results here. You understand? So we call them WASI tourism schools. We know all of them. But we did a documentary. We went undercover. And we did a documentary of some of the WASI tourism schools. It's a school called All for Christ Senior High School in the German area. There are so many of them. And we have aired the documentary on Joy News. This is not new. But the thing is that it is not stopping. It's actually escalating because it is big business.
I listened to that documentary somewhere in the Bonny region as
well. But I would have been happy if the former president would have ended that statement by telling us what he would do.
Okay.
To curb the issue of examination.
Let's not talk about the transition rate of people from WASI, from senior high school to secondary schools, and the fact that it's quite expensive. Fees are expensive, hostel facilities and all that. And there are some very good, brilliant students who would want to further their education, but they cannot because of financial challenges. How do we go about that? There are scholarships available. As to whether it's easily accessible to such people, I don't know. I know of individuals who are, putting their hands in their own pockets to help students get to the universities. It's not easy. How do we help brilliant students to be able to have a university education?
Yeah, and I saw Eugene mobilizing funds to support some
he's
kids.
One for a young guy.
A thumbs up to all those who supported the initiative and to him for his initiative. We've been doing this every year, but sometimes you get tired because you see. You can't run a society without systems. Systems must be doing this. It shouldn't always be humans. It should be systems. Ghana has a target to reach gross tertiary enrollment of 40% by 2030. That is the president's target. That is in the education strategy plan. As we speak, we are at 20%, and nothing shows that we can meet the target of 40% by 2030. Because it will require a virtual doubling of our current efforts. Now, averagely, about 160,000 students are moving from secondary to tertiary by the end of 2022. That was about 39%. It was even 42% in the previous year. Declined. If you have that situation, then it means that out of over 400,000 students that you are churning out, 250,000 do not go to tertiary. 250,000 will remain at home. Our secondary education system does not equip students with skills for the world of work. It doesn't give them skills that they can start working, with the exception of those who attend TVET institutions, who are less than 10%. And so we are careful that in expanding access to secondary education, you don't create another layer of unemployed people. Then they become a national security threat. Our tertiary transition is not the best. We haven't improved it. Why? Because we haven't put in place mechanism to improve it. His Excellency the Vice President introduced the Ghana card, grant-free student loan, where students are able to use the Ghana card to access student loan. So if I'm poor, once I have the Ghana card, I won't need a student guarantor. It made a lot of sense. We applauded it. But we cautioned him before the launch that if you bring in a Ghana card, which is great, there are two things that will happen. One, the repayment rate will go down because